You know, yesterday we got the news about Terry Funk passing away at the age of 79. And all day yesterday was filled with tributes from just all walks of life and people that worked with him and knew him and or watched him on TV. And as you would expect, I mean, he's a older man who spanned generations, 79 years old, and he lived an amazing life and had an amazing career. And so the last thing that I was expecting to log on and see a couple of hours ago was a tweet from Triple H about another unfortunate wrestling death, but this one is very different. Very different than hearing about someone like a Terry Funk or someone who is of an advanced age. Uh, but like many of you, I checked and I see Triple H posts a tweet at 6 o'clock this evening. And that tweet read as follows: just received a call from WWE Hall of Famer Mike Rotunda, who informed us of the tragic news that our WWE family member for life, Windham Rotunda, also known as Bray Wyatt, unexpectedly passed earlier today. Our thoughts are with his family, and we ask that you, or everyone, respect their privacy at this time. And that is certainly not a piece of news that I was expecting to be reading, especially given some of the recent reports about Bray, who has been out for a very long time. That is one of the most shocking things, frankly, that I've come online to read when it comes to this sort of thing. And we've had a lot of examples of this, unfortunately, in wrestling over the years, and a lot of young, premature wrestler deaths for a whole host of different reasons. And it wasn't stated in the tweet exactly what the situation was or what the nature of his passing was, but a little while ago we got a little bit of clarity on that from Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful, who posted on Twitter. Now, this is coming from him. He posted this a short time ago. And he stated that I was given permission to reveal that earlier this year, Windham Rotunda Bray Wyatt got COVID that exacerbated a heart issue. There was a lot of positive progress towards a return and his recovery. Unfortunately, today he suffered a heart attack and he passed away. And so that is apparently what happened with Bray Wyatt, and why he passed away so suddenly and unexpectedly earlier today. 36 years old and four children at home, two daughters from a previous marriage, two kids with JoJo Offerman, the former ring announcer for WWE, whom he met in WWE. They got married a few years ago. They had two kids of their own, a 4-year-old little boy and a 3-year-old girl. So many of his kids are very small, which only makes a situation like this even worse when you have little kids. Obviously, it's terrible no matter what. But reading that is a I mean, what do you say? You know, it's a punch to the gut whenever you read something like that. Um, at first, your first inclination is to check and make sure that Triple H isn't hacked, and could this be true? This can't be true. And um, one of the first things I thought of, honestly, after I saw the news and just thinking about this whole situation, was Brody Lee. And another member of the Wyatt family, a very close friend of Bray's, who also passed away unexpectedly, tragically, far too young. He was 41 years old. It was only 3 years ago, around Christmas time, that he passed away. And I know how much that impacted Bray. And I know that because he talked about it. He was open about it. And it's the reason why he said he never wanted to go back to the old Wyatt family gimmick when he first started the Wyatt family in NXT and they brought it to the main roster, and he was the cult leader and he had the Hawaiian shirt. And there have been people who have said, oh, he should go back to that. And he made it very clear he didn't want to do that because he felt it would be disrespecting his friend. Because his friend was as much a part of that as any of the three of them were. And to him, it just would not have felt right to go back to that incarnation of the character without Brody being around. And, you could tell just from the look on his face and the sound of his voice when he would talk about Brody, how much that really had an impact on him. And the thought that 2/3 of the Wyatt family now are gone is just... I can't imagine what Eric Rowan must be going through. Obviously his family, but I can't imagine what his colleagues and his friends, but like someone like Eric Rowan, who you saw how emotional he was on the Brody Lee tribute show that AEW did a few years ago. And I'm sure someone like him getting this news, it's just awful. I mean, there really is no other word to describe it except it is devastating. Now, he had been away from the ring since February. The last time he was in the ring for a match was the end of February. He had a series of live event matches with LA Knight coming out of the match they had at the Royal Rumble. And it was earlier this month, it was only a few weeks ago, that Fightful had a report on their website that indicated that it was the illness that he was suffering from. It was not a physical injury like a torn muscle or a concussion or something like that you would expect, or a knee injury that might keep someone out for an extended period of time. It was some sort of illness. And Fightful indicated that the illness was both career-threatening and potentially life-threatening. And I think for a lot of people who are wondering, where's Bray Wyatt and what's going on with Bray Wyatt and how come he's been gone for so long? And, is it a creative issue or is there really an illness? What's the deal here? When that report came out a few weeks ago, I think that hit home with a lot of people and they realized how serious the situation really was. But the indication from that report was that he was doing much better. And WWE was just being extra cautious with him. Excuse me. Being extra cautious with him because they just didn't want to take any chances. Obviously, they knew how serious the situation was. We didn't. They didn't want to disclose that information. And that's certainly not something they have to do. If they don't want to disclose it, they don't have to disclose it. But they were taking their time. They were not rushing back into things. I'm sure it was very frustrating for him, having just come back and then to be sidelined for so many months. There was another report out recently that maybe he would appear at SummerSlam, and obviously that never happened. But there were a lot of things kind of bubbling up, and you heard about creative ideas being pitched for him, and there could be something potentially as soon as next month. For him to come back to the company, which would be almost a year to the month that he made his return. But they were just waiting on him to be cleared. I think back to an interview that Mike Rotunda did just recently. It was at one of these conventions, and Bill Apter briefly went over to talk to Mike Rotunda. And Mike Rotunda, for those who don't know, Bray's father, famous wrestler in his own right. He was IRS for many years in WWE and Michael Wall Street in WCW, for those who don't know. So Bill Apter said, look, I'm going to ask you the $1 million question. Everybody wants to know what's going on with Bray Wyatt. And this was only maybe 2 weeks ago. And the quote that he gave Bill Apter was, you read a lot of stuff on the internet, which I would not believe a lot of, or in my case, any of it. Bray Wyatt, I'm sure he'll return to WWE, hopefully shortly, and we'll go from there. So he didn't give away a lot of information there, but he sounded optimistic. That Bray would be back relatively soon. He was supposed to wrestle Bobby Lashley at WrestleMania. That was the plan. And I don't think this is the time to get into the specifics of the creative and whether or not, he should have been doing that or something else. That's irrelevant right now. But he was scheduled to have a match at WrestleMania. And it was right around that period of time that he disappeared, right? Early March is when he disappeared from television and we didn't see him. There was no mention of him. But clearly they were building to something with him and the Uncle Howdy stuff, which was going to be his brother Bo Dallas, and I feel obviously I'm gutted for him as well, and his sister Mika, the whole family. Yeah, I just can't imagine what they're going through. But whatever it was, the issue bubbled up around that time, and that's when he disappeared. And there had been radio silence for a very long time, and I know that even from messages that I got and questions asking me about Bray, there were people who were big fans of his who were wondering, what's going on. They were concerned and speculating about what it may or may not be. Um, every now and then you would see a picture on social media of a fan who saw Bray. He was out walking or he was at the supermarket or something, and he was really cool with them, and he would snap a photo. And so you knew that he was, he was doing relatively okay if he's, out and about. And then to get this kind of news is shocking. And I know that there were a lot of people on that WWE roster who worked with him, and in some cases who may have come up with him through developmental, who have nothing but positive things to say about him. And just scanning through some of their tweets in just the last hour, and the outpouring of messages, and I saw stuff from Big E and just so many people on the WWE roster. Um, imagine what they're going through right now. Imagine what's going through their heads. That somebody they worked with who is the same age as them, and seemingly, still in the prime of his career as far as what he could have accomplished, just like that, is gone. When I think back on his career, he did stuff prior to the Wyatt family, came up in developmental, and there was, different gimmick changes that he went through. But the original Wyatt family concept is what got him in the door on the WWE main roster. That's where they really hit the jackpot creatively. And we saw Bray Wyatt, and we saw Luke Harper, and we saw Eric Rowan make their debut. And this was, at this point, we're in 2023 now. So we're going back a decade. We're a little over a decade when we first saw the Wyatt family on television. And it clicked. It was something unique. The vignettes that they shot, the character that he was playing, it reminded me of was it Nick Nolte? I forgot, or maybe I'm thinking of De Niro, but the character from Cape Fear. Clearly, it drew inspiration from Waylon Mercy as well. I think there were different inspirations for that original Wyatt character, but came up to the main roster, and I look back on his career, and again, I'm just going off the cuff here, but one of the things I always think of first, and I always sing the praises of their matches together, the Wyatt family and the Shield. And there are a lot of parallels between all of the people in those factions. But you think of Roman Reigns and the path that he was going down as the chosen one and the one who got the big push. And for a period of time there, for a while, it looked like Bray Wyatt and he were neck and neck. It looked like, what kind of John Cena and Randy Orton were for their era of WWE during that TVPG era. That maybe this next era would be led by Roman Reigns on one side and Bray Wyatt on the other. And remember that one match they had on television where they were tag team partners, and Bray, I think, hit Sister Abigail and was going for the pin and kind of pointed. Somebody was coming after him, and Roman speared the other guy. It was just one of those moments that I still have in my brain, and I thought to myself, that's pretty cool, and we could be looking at the future here with these two in this company. But the Wyatt family and the Shield, when they first put those two factions together, and really I think at that point they were still two heel factions, but the crowd was sort of naturally gravitating towards the Shield. The electricity in the air when they did their initial standoff on television was just fantastic. And they had that first 6-man tag match at the Elimination Chamber. So I guess by that point, maybe the Shield was kind of in babyface mode. But that was Elimination Chamber in 2014. And it's just everything that I love about pro wrestling. When those two teams came together, and just the way the crowd reacted before they even touched, it was something special. And they had a couple of other matches on television as well, but I always think back to that Elimination Chamber match. I think back also to Bray working with Bryan Danielson, and they did the whole angle where Daniel Bryan, sorry, but they did the whole angle where Daniel Bryan joined the Wyatt family, and it was very short lived. But one of the all-time great moments in Monday Night Raw history was the cage match, and it was Bray and Bryan, I believe, against the Usos, and that would have been January of 2014. And they did the angle when the match was over after they lost, and Bryan broke away from the Wyatt family. And I just remember it's one of those moments that if you're going to make a ranking of the top 25 or top 30 or top 50 moments in Raw history, you have to not only have that on the list, but certainly on my list, it's going to be pretty high up there. That's one of those special moments. Watching Bryan break free. And then going to the Rumble and Bryan giving Bray, honestly, one of the best matches of his entire career. And it just felt like Bray was on his way, right? There was something unique about him in that character, and he was, just like Roman was, Bray was on his way. And, there were bumps in the road along the way. We don't have to get into all of them, but I think back, and I also remember the Randy Orton angle when he joined the Wyatt family, and Luke Harper being very cautious and kind of letting his guard down around Randy Orton and not fully trusting him. It was pretty clear what Orton was doing at the time. He was kind of infiltrating the group. But that was around the time, that was the Elimination Chamber in 2017 when Bray won the WWE Championship. And I remember that being actually an excellent Elimination Chamber match. I think Cena was in there, AJ Styles was in there, and Bray won the title. And then from there, Orton broke out of the Wyatt family, and he wasn't the champion for very long. And there were certainly missteps along the way as far as creative and dropping the ball with him and things that they could have done with him, I think, that would have elevated him to a higher level than he attained. But then we get to the feed. And it's a completely different, chapter of his career. We kind of leave the old Wyatt family character behind, and now we have the feed, which was something, completely different than anything anybody else in the company was doing at the time. And I remember in those early days, it was something that I thought was very unique in a positive way. I was intrigued by the Firefly Funhouse vignettes and the stuff with the puppets. And yeah, it was goofy, but again, it was goofy, but almost in kind of a disturbing way. And I was intrigued. And maybe it's the horror fan in me. I don't know. But clearly there was a lot of creativity involved in that. And little Easter eggs that he would leave in those segments. And again, when it comes to the booking, unfortunately, things in the end did not work out probably the way that he had envisioned. But for a while there, he had some great success with the Fiend character. And then he got released. Then he got fired. And it felt like a fall from grace. Here's somebody who, years earlier, I thought he and Roman might be the two to kind of lead that era of the company. And Roman was on his way because he was the chosen one. And Bray did not reach those same heights. And then Bray was out of the company. And it was met with a lot of shock at the time. There were a lot of releases in WWE around that time. And I talked about them plenty at that time, Bray being one of them. But then eventually, all roads lead back to WWE. As they do in a lot of cases. Braun Strowman is another one who was released, and eventually he came back. And Braun is another one who was a part of the Wyatt family. And I'm sure he and Alexa Bliss and all the people who work with Bray, I'm sure are very just not in a good way right now. But he did make his way back to the company. And we had that White Rabbit campaign with the QR codes and everything. And everybody thought it was Bray, but we weren't sure. And it was building to something. And what it built to was his return last year at Extreme Rules. And if you saw that show after the main event, when the lights went out and the door appeared and the door swung open and he pulled the mask off and you heard the crowd. And I'm sure that reaction for him was in some ways vindication. of, you made a mistake getting rid of me. Now I'm going to prove to you what you were missing out on. I'm sure it was a great feeling for him. And I know it was, because I think back to the first promo that he did on SmackDown following his return last year. And I pulled some of the text from it because I thought it was one of the best promos that he's ever done. Not because it was, had a lot of dialogue to it. It was, very long, but just because it was a side of that character that we had never been exposed to before. He was always playing a character. He was playing the cult leader character. He was playing the Fiend. He was always playing some other part. This was the first time where he seemingly was really allowed to be himself. And he said as much in the promo. And he said, "This is me. Genuine me for the first time. I lost my career. I lost two people who were very, very close to me." One of those people being Luke Harper. "And I lost my way. I got to a point where I thought that everything I had ever done here was all meaningless, that nothing I ever did had mattered to anyone, and I was wrong. Thank you. You all saved my life." That was his message to the fans less than a year ago. And I think there was a lot more truth to that promo than maybe some people realized at the time. Yes, it was feeding into whatever this Uncle Howdy story was. But to me, that was as close to a shoot on live television that we ever got from Bray Wyatt. Because I am sure that that was real emotion on his part, and those were probably his real feelings. He did go through a period of time there where he lost some very important people in his life. And I'm sure he was very depressed, as anybody would be. And, it makes you question your own mortality. These are young people we're talking about here, in their mid-30s, late 30s, early 40s. People who are literally they've lived half their lives, right? They should have a whole other half of their lives left to live. And that coupled with the release and probably him second-guessing himself and people saying all sorts of things about him after he got cut, I'm sure that it messed with his head, and maybe it made him second-guess himself. So his return last year, when he initially came back, as far as the business that he did, as far as ratings and social media interest and all those metrics that you measure all of those things by, were through the roof. And it looked like this was going to be another lease on life for him. And unfortunately, here we are less than a year later, and it didn't work out that way. And that's an understatement, because we're not talking about him not getting a push or him getting buried or him, all that nonsense that we sometimes talk about. We're talking about the fact that he's no longer here. And there were things going on that we were not privy to that were far more serious than anybody knew anything about. I'm not even sure how many people on the roster knew about what was going on. And I'm sure that information will come out in the days ahead. But again, for those who might be filtering in late here, I'm sure you've heard the news by now. But Bray Wyatt, Windham Rotunda, Triple H was the one who broke the news on Twitter earlier this evening, passed away earlier today at the age of 36. Sean Ross Sapp was out with a report a little while later saying that he was given permission to reveal that earlier this year, Wyatt had gotten COVID, which exacerbated a heart issue. I'm not sure if that was a heart issue that was caused by COVID or if that was some pre-existing issue they didn't know he had. That I don't know. But it exacerbated a heart issue. And there were a lot of positive signs that he would be able to make a comeback very soon. It looked like he was on the mend, and he seemingly was doing better and doing well. And then earlier today, he suffered a fatal heart attack. And that is that is all that we know. At this, I hate doing stories like this. It sucks. But that is all that we know at this point. And I just thought, obviously I'm going to talk more about Bray this weekend, and maybe we'll have a little more information at that point. But, it's just one of those things where I have so many things going through my head, and then people wanted to, share comments of their own. And I said, why don't we just go live for a little bit, and you guys can share your thoughts and I can share mine, and we can get out of here. But yeah, yeah. To come immediately after the Terry Funk news yesterday, which was also very sad to hear, is a double whammy. A double whammy. But Terry Funk lived the life of three or four different people, and Bray Wyatt was taken from this earth far too soon. And again, my condolences to his friends, his family, his colleagues. I am sure that tomorrow night SmackDown will be dedicated in his memory, and there'll be a lot more on him and his career and the people who knew him sharing stories about him as they should. So I am sure that we will be talking a lot more about him tomorrow. I do want to just go through some of your messages here, because I know you guys are sending messages on in. So let me just take a look at what you guys are saying. And maybe there's, again, as far as matches and memories that, you might look at and say, hey, that was Bray Wyatt at his peak, or that's my favorite Bray Wyatt memory. Or if you have, other words that you would like to share, by all means, go ahead and do so. But, when I look back on his impact on the company, were there things that should have been done with him, or were there things maybe that he should have accomplished that he didn't? Sure, you can say that about a lot of different people. But when you look back on his career, you look back on his body of work, in the period of time that he was in WWE on the main roster, he accomplished more than most people will who get into the wrestling business. I mean, really, think about the different things that he did and the different matches and feuds and programs that he was a part of, and the championships that he held, and the different incarnations of his character, and just the way. Look, we have people that are in our live chat every week who are big Bray Wyatt fans, and I know you know who I'm talking about. What he did resonated with a lot of people, and that's more than you can say for a lot of wrestlers who get into the wrestling business. So you can't say that he didn't make his mark. In those 10 years, I mean, you take out the time that he was gone from the company, it's about a decade, and in that decade, there was quite a bit that he was able to accomplish. Yeah, it still doesn't really feel real to me. I'll be perfectly honest with you. And I'm periodically just checking here to see if there is any additional comments or news, because again, it is still very raw. WWE did put a statement out. I'll read that to you now. WWE is saddened to learn that Windham Rotunda, also known as Bray Wyatt, passed away on August 24th at the age of 36. Known for his captivating performances and incredible in-ring presence, Wyatt was a defining superstar of his generation and accomplished many feats in WWE, including becoming WWE Champion in 2017, as we just talked about. From his leadership of the Wyatt family alongside Luke Harper, Eric Rowan, and Braun Strowman, to his enthralling time as The Fiend, Wyatt embarked on an incredible career and saw several iconic rivalries with superstars such as John Cena, Randy Orton, and The Undertaker. And WWE extends its condolences to Rotunda's family, friends, and fans. And that's another great point too. Someone else who was very, complimentary of him and who was a big fan of his was The Undertaker. And it was earlier this year at Raw 30, that they shared that moment in the ring where it was LA Knight, it was The Undertaker, it was Bray Wyatt, and Undertaker leaned in and he whispered something to Bray that I don't think he's ever revealed. I think he's kept it between them. But he whispered something in his ear. And anytime that he's been interviewed about him or asked about him, he's always been very complimentary, and he's spoken openly about the fact that, the company needs to do more with him, and if you just kind of let him be him, the sky's the limit. So, he saw the potential in him to do more, than what he did. And yeah, they did. They shared that moment. It was just this year, at Raw 30 when he came out as the American Badass, and they had that moment in the ring together. Let me take a look at some of your messages here. Luis is joining us as well. Says, rest easy, Bray. You are with Brody now. The comedic genius says, this one hurts. Rest in peace, Bray. Say hi to John for us. Remakian Productions, at least he is reunited with Brody Lee. I did see Amanda Huber post something on Twitter. Obviously, she's very upset over what happened. That is the widow of Brody Lee. Data and Boys podcast. My son had his third birthday party Fiend themed. Says he is gutted. It was a character that appealed to a lot of kids, especially with the puppets and everything. Like I said, I mean, business-wise, as far as merch and all that, when he was doing the Fiend stuff, you always saw his name mentioned at number one. That stuff, the stuff with Alexa Bliss and Lily the Doll and all that, all of that stuff was from his mind and his imagination. And even he said that sometimes his mind could just run a little too fast, and he's got all sorts of ideas, and it's hard to contain them. He always struck me as somebody who was very creative, but maybe needed to sometimes be guided because there were so many ideas that he had for this character and maybe other characters that we never got to see. But his mind just worked differently. I don't think you needed to know him personally to know that his mind just worked differently. You could just, if you listen to him speak, if you watched him on television playing these characters, he kind of marched to his own drum. And I say that in a good way. He was unique in that way. God of Seduction says, believe it or not, an hour before I read the news, I was singing the Firefly Funhouse theme. The Fiend and Bray in general was a captivating figure. Nick Camilo with the $9.99 says, such awful news, even more important than his obvious talent and passion for wrestling. He seemed to be a beautiful person overall. Thoughts and prayers to his family, who are no doubt in much pain. And I actually have a story to that effect that I will share before I get out of here. It's actually one of my favorite Bray Wyatt stories. So I'll get to that in a few minutes. Be calm, see clearly. My condolences. Please, everybody, stay healthy. On that subject, finding out from Sean Ross Sapp the nature of what it was that he was going through is tough, because and I'm sure many of you do as well, know people who, especially when COVID first started, there were a lot of people who were affected by that, and it affected some people worse than others. And there are people who I know, maybe I wasn't as close to them as others were, but people that I knew, whether it be through work or friends of a friend, who also went through similar things and also passed away from it. And that just makes it so much worse. It's awful no matter what, but hearing that, it just sucks, because again, it just affects people in different ways, and some people are able to kick out and other people unfortunately are not. Alex Jimenez says, my father passed away from a heart attack a few months ago. We both loved watching Wyatt's work. This is so surreal. Every day is a blessing. Now the World 138 says, when I am king, I will build my castle next to the sea, so I can laugh at my enemies as they drown. Favorite saying of his. Rest easy. Isaiah, feeling heartbroken. Another one of my favorites, gone too soon. Rest in peace, Bray Wyatt. Be calm, see clearly. Let me switch over so you guys can actually see the messages here. BComC clearly says, I will legit lose it if something happens to John Moxley. Well, let's hope that doesn't happen. Jack Lopez, every time Bray came out, he had the whole world in his hands. Truly a captivating performer. Vince Russo, the world was and is truly forever in his hands. Hope the Fireflies lead him to eternal peace. That is well said. Naughty delicious chicken with flavor. Bray Wyatt, a man with a wonderful imagination, a great talker, a great father, and a kind, wonderful human being. This news is really gut-punching. I did not want to believe it at first, but unfortunately the reality started to set in. Terrible Trey says, so heartbroken, training to be a wrestler, and I took so much inspiration from him. I hope he knew how loved he truly was. I think he realized that, and I mean, honestly, I think he kind of touched on that in that comeback promo. When he came back to the company and he talked about the outpouring of support and the outpouring of love and how the fans saved him. The fans saved his life. I think he realized that. And maybe it took him being released from the company and seeing that outpouring of support for him to realize that. But sometimes it takes a situation like that. And then other times, unfortunately, you don't get that outpouring of support until somebody dies. And at that point, it's like, that person's not even here to see the impact that they had on people. I think it was pretty clear from the promo and some of the things he said after he came back that he realized there were a lot of people who were, fans of his that maybe he didn't expect, who welcomed him back with open arms when he came back to the company last year. And I think he did realize that. I think we all did, just based on the reaction to his return. Brother Fluff, thank you for helping us process this. So many people had so many just messages that they were tweeting me and emailing me and stuff. And I said, I think we should probably just, come on live for a little bit and just talk about this, because it just sucks. Corey Mitchell, this one hurts really badly. I am devastated. Thank you for talking us through this. I am heartbroken. Carolina Blood, thank you for streaming this. This is a bit comforting. This doesn't just make sense, or this just doesn't make sense. Rest in peace, Bray Wyatt. God of Seduction, I think part of the shock is the fact that we have all been wondering what was next for him. He was in the back of our minds, even though he was away. Again, it was just only a few weeks ago I was sharing an update on the podcast about him doing better and the discussion internally about potential creative ideas for him when he was ready to come back, and possibly as early as September. So I think in our minds, a lot of us were thinking, okay, where does Bray Wyatt sort of fit in to the creative picture in WWE? And you start thinking about comeback feuds and what brand he'll be on and stuff. So I think a lot of people in their minds, and certainly in mine, and there's Uncle Saudi right there. But I think in a lot of our minds, we were already looking ahead like, okay, he's coming back. It's just a matter of when and what is the best place for him to be, right? Who is the best person for him maybe to be paired off with? And then to be hit by this, it's just, you talk about out of left field. It just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't. Triss Riley, Bray was the one who made SmackDown entertaining. The Fiend was one of his best characters. I don't care about how creative did him. The fact he made something scary so damn cool. Rest in peace. The comedic genius. That man never had a bad theme, but Shatter was my favorite. Now I don't think I can listen to it anymore. Also, the Funhouse Mania match was my favorite. That will certainly go down, I think, as one of the more unique WrestleMania matches. You know, they made the most of, same thing with the Boneyard match. You know, they made the most of the circumstances that were dealt to them because of the lockdown and because of no fans. And I don't think you could have two more diametrically opposed matches than the Boneyard match and the Funhouse match. I think, as I described it at the time, the Funhouse match was kind of like an acid trip, and I wouldn't know from an acid trip, but I would imagine it might just be similar to that. But that just goes to the whole creativity thing. Like, who else would have come up with something like that? You know, who else would have imagined all of the different elements that we saw in that match, and some of the throwbacks to the classic blue cage and John Cena coming out as a member of the NWO, and I think Bray, if I remember, I think he did briefly portray the old Wyatt family character briefly in that match. So, LJBK827. The night my daughter was born was the night that Bray wrestled Bryan on Raw in the cage. Well, I think they were partners. I don't think they weren't wrestling each other that night. Says it was already a moment now. It will hit more than ever. One of the all-time best moments in Raw history. I said it before. I will say it again. The fact that he is no longer with us does not change that fact. That right there is one of the all-time greatest moments in the history of that show. Retro KOH, thank you for taking the time to stream. This is heartbreaking. Thank you, Retro. Taylor Cannon, I'm only 3 years older than Bray. This is absolutely heartbreaking to hear. Rest in peace, Bray. Austin Blansett, prayers to the family of Bray Wyatt at this time. He is the first active roster death in WWE since Benoit in 2007. Respect the family at this time. You know, I hadn't thought about that way, but I think you may be right. As far as like active roster. Wow. Alex Schmidt, Firefly Funhouse match against Cena was so well done. You could tell they had fun making that. Naughty Delicious, rest in peace to Windham Rotunda. Forever known as The Fiend, and most of all, Bray Wyatt. Austin says, also prayers for the wrestlers and workers who work with Bray. These are real people with real feelings, praying for them as well at this time. Matthew Dinkins, the Wyatt family in 2013 was a breath of fresh air and so different from the acts at the time. I hope the kids get the mental help that they will need. Yeah, I mean, again, it came along at the right time, I feel like, with them in the Shield. When they finally connected, they were over enough that the fans really bought into it. And that character was, I thought back to Waylon Mercy at the time, and Waylon Mercy was not a major character in WWE because at that point, Danny Spivey was, physically he was washed and his back was all wrecked and there wasn't much he could do. But it was clear as day to me that there were elements of that character that Bray incorporated into his own. And I don't know, in some ways, maybe he took what that character could have been and he put his own spin on it. And he did take it to greater heights than Mercy ever attained. Retro KOH, please. Yeah, I'll look into that. The real CSO2, I knew something was definitely wrong, considering the fact that it was being very close to the vest. Never a good sign. Yeah, and again, it could have just been a situation where sometimes things are just personal and they just don't want the information out there. It doesn't necessarily mean anything. But it was concerning, the fact that so long had gone by. Usually if somebody is out after a couple months, you hear something about what it may be. I think it was the length of time that he was out that really got people wondering, okay, what's going on here? This may be something more than just an injury or some kind of concussion issue that he's not cleared from. There's something more to it than just that. And when I kept hearing stuff about illness and not injury, COVID kept going through my head as well. Because I know he had, if you remember many years ago, I think it might have been in 2017, there was that mumps outbreak in WWE. And I believe he was one of the people who had the mumps. They were supposed to do a pay-per-view match, I believe, with him and Finn Balor, and it didn't happen. And if my timeline is correct on that, I think that was the mumps outbreak in the company. So, I didn't know if it was something like that. Maybe, he had the mumps again. I mean, your mind starts to wander, and you start to wonder, what it could possibly be. Wally Walls. Bray against Daniel Bryan, Royal Rumble 2014 is one of his best matches. Absolutely. Tag teaming with Roman on Raw against the League of Nations had an epic ending. Great person and character. You will be missed. Run. Naughty Delicious. It's crazy this news breaking on Vince McMahon's birthday. I believe today is Vince McMahon's birthday. I believe he is. Would he be 77 or 78? I think he might be. I think he might be 78. The Winston Slip. Thanks for giving us a place to grieve. No, I mean, it's good. It's good for people to just have a place where they can go to chat for a little bit. Speedy, rest in peace, Bray. When he was on in the ring, he was on. Jeremy Thunderstrikes, all I can say is this hurts a lot. Rest in peace. Terrence Toussaint, finally can catch you online, but definitely did not want to watch under these circumstances. Was at the house show in Atlanta last December when he just recently returned. Rest in paradise, Wyatt. Yeah, he had some house show matches with Jinder Mahal. Might have been the Madison Square Garden show where he broke his finger, I think. Adam Timmons. Terrible news. Bray has Brody to welcome him with open arms. Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. This also comes in a year. I mentioned Terry Funk before just yesterday, but we had Jay Briscoe, earlier this year, which was another way too soon, premature wrestling death under just horrible circumstances that also involved, little kids who lost their father. And hearing stories like this does not get any easier. That was a terrible, terrible story, and this is also a terrible, terrible loss. Jazz Jackrabbit, just awful news. Love him or not, we were all looking forward to seeing him again. Truly saddening. The world lost a loving father so soon. Rest in peace, Bray. K-Dog's Kennel, Elimination Chamber 2017, seeing Bray win the WWE title will forever be a memory in my heart now. This one stings badly. Temjin Zephyr says, I know it's been a while. Left the movie theater and then the news stunned me and made my night bad. My friend was a huge Bray Wyatt fan and he is heartbroken as everyone. Rest in power, Bray Wyatt. Stone Norton. I was there live when he won the WWE Championship at Elimination Chamber. That was the last wrestling show that I saw live with my grandfather due to his health. I have been crying on and off since I heard the news. Rest in peace. Brian Becerra says, rest in peace, Bray Wyatt, and rest in peace, Terry Funk. Yeah, this has been a very shitty 1-2 punch over these last couple of days, unfortunately. The Mount Vernon kid, Christopher Bennett, says, Gandhi said, in the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists. In the midst of darkness, light persists. Rest in peace, Bray Wyatt. Chris Manson. I was a sophomore when I got back into WWE in 2013. Bryan, Bray, and The Shield is what really got me back. Crazy how January, February, Bray had his best singles match at the Royal Rumble and one of the best tag matches. Yeah, I guess they came on back-to-back months, right? The match with Bryan and then the Chamber six-man. I think they were back-to-back months. Bill Gates. I see what you did there. Been with Solo since day one, and this is my first chat. Well, I wish it was under better circumstances, but it's good to have you here. Magician Sapphire says, man, this is horrible news, and Bray will truly be missed. It is a shame because it feels like Bray never really got the chance to show us what he could do with full creative control. James Cooper, first Brody, now Windham. Rest in peace, gone too soon. Please send love to Rowan and Strowman and everybody else. They need it the most. Shutterbug fan, if it wasn't for Bray, my best friend would not have gotten back into wrestling. Thank you, Bray. Rest in peace, Windham Rotunda. Soccer J75, finished watching Dark Side of the Ring about Brian Pillman, and then this news breaks. Two creative minds that unfortunately left way too soon. Yeah, and Pillman was another one who had, children, small children even, at that time. I think his wife was pregnant when he passed away. And that just makes it so much worse. Scott Woodford, I saw the Elimination Chamber match, The Shield against the Wyatt family, live with my friend who passed away last year. I'm very sorry to hear that. The Lone Wolf, truly heartbreaking, going to miss him. Rest in peace, Wyatt. Switch over here so I can get a easier view on my end. We have got Leon. Thank you for being with us tonight, Leon. I appreciate it. And again, for those people who are coming in late and are asking questions and don't live on social media and don't know what happened, I'll run back through the news soon. And then, like I said, I have a Bray story that I think is a positive story, kind of a happy story to share before we get out of here. Anderson Blitz, my brother and I were at the Christmas MSG show last year as a present for him. And going crazy seeing Bray Wyatt's first match in 2 years. This hurts. Spark Shadow Tiger, Clouds of Uncertainty. Thank you. Swank says, I literally just got off work and opened my phone to this news. Very tragic and unexpected to hear. Yeah, this is one of those where I think you look back on it and you're going to remember, where you were and how and where you got your news when you found out about what happened. There are some wrestler deaths that stick out to me more than others where I can literally remember exactly what I was doing when I heard the news. Benoit was one. Eddie was one. Pillman was one. Owen, well, unfortunately, I think a lot of people were watching live when that happened. But there are just, I don't know. There are just certain moments like that stand out more than others, and I feel like this is one of those moments. Joseph Brooks, rest in peace, Bray. So glad he got to be a 2-time world champion. God bless his soul. Would have loved to have seen Bray alt egos against Foley's alt egos. Rest in peace, Bray. Bray and Mick Foley, back when Foley was still active full time, and he was doing the Mankind character. I think the Mankind character more so, but even the Three Faces of Foley, that would have been a very interesting one, because I think you would have had two creative minds there, who I think would have worked very well together. I think they would have been able to play, especially on promos. I think they would have played off of each other very well. Roca Will, I'll never forget me and some friends cussing up a storm at a bar because he lost to John Cena at WrestleMania 30. I was at WrestleMania 30, and I think you were not, were on the same wavelength for that one there. And that's another moment I actually forgot about. WrestleMania 30, when he got the live musical entrance from Mark, was it Crozier, I think, who sang his Wyatt family theme song. That was a great entrance at WrestleMania 30. It might not have been the outcome that people wanted to see, but the live entrance he got in New Orleans at the Superdome for that WrestleMania is one of the more memorable, I think, live musical entrances at a WrestleMania. Leon says, this has put a damper on going to All In. Well, some things are more important than a wrestling show. So, but if you are going to the show, I don't know if you are in England or if you were traveling there. I know a lot of people actually who are in transit to the UK as we speak. And I would imagine that they either are not aware of the news yet or probably were reading about it right before they flew out to London. And I'm sure that was something that they were not expecting to be seeing as they took off. So, going to be a lot of very surprised people, I think, when they land, if they did not read about it before they took off. Jay Baker, this news has me on the brink of tears. I am a huge fan and was excited for his return. Rest in peace, Bray. Brody is waiting for you with a glass of whiskey. Adam, do I think SmackDown will do a special episode dedicated to Bray Wyatt tomorrow? I don't know. I'm sure there will be plenty of tributes to him tomorrow. Whether they will dedicate the entire episode, I don't know. I don't know. I think it would be very difficult for them to do a regular show. I mean, again, you're talking about somebody who was an active member. I say active. Obviously, he's been missing for many months, but he was an active member of that roster. He was part of their family. And as somebody pointed out before, I don't think we've had a situation like this since Benoit in '07, as far as an active member of the roster passing away like this. I mean, Brody was part of AEW when he passed away. So I don't know. But I think it would be very difficult for them to just continue on with their usual storylines under the circumstances, because I don't think people's minds are going to be on storylines. I think people's minds, the people who work there especially, I think their minds are going to be elsewhere. It's going to be tough, you know. And I always feel for the wrestlers in these situations, because I think on the one hand it might be cathartic for them to be on the road and to be with their wrestling family, because they all knew each other and they're all friendly with each other, as opposed to just being at home and being away from them. But on the other hand, you're flying out and you're going to work under these horrible circumstances where most, normal people with quote unquote normal jobs, if they found out that a close friend or a family member had passed away, going to work would be the last thing on their mind. They would want to be home. They would want to grieve. They would want to be with family. Wrestling is a very unique business because they have their own family there. I mean, really, in many ways, not that everybody is necessarily friendly, but it is like a family. It's like a community that they have there, and so it might be cathartic for them to all be together in one place like that. But I think their minds are going to be on other things tomorrow. Hulkling 93, rest in peace, Bray Wyatt. I remember experiencing his entrance in MSG in 2017. Awe-inspiring. Me and my friends still say they be lying to you, man, in his voice. SE Scoops chiming in. What a tragedy. Father, husband, son, friend, and elite talent. One of a kind, he reached the top of the industry and will never be duplicated. An icon, rest in peace. And I think that's a good point also. For all the talk about creative fumbles and things that they could have done with him, and Vince McMahon not utilizing him to his full potential or not seeing him, maybe as a top star. I mean, there's plenty of things that people have said and will say, and now is not the time to get into that aspect of it. But even if you believe that there were a lot of missteps and mistakes creatively with Bray Wyatt, it's a good point. He is somebody who did get to the top of his industry. And maybe he didn't have an extended run there like a Roman Reigns or a John Cena, but he was WWE champion, right? He had a few WrestleMania matches under his belt against John Cena and against The Undertaker and against Randy Orton. Actually had 2 matches against Randy Orton at WrestleMania. And you can't look back on the career of Bray Wyatt and say that he wasn't one of their top main event performers. He was. And not everybody gets to reach that level. So, it may not have been perfect. There may have been a lot of bumps in the road. I mean, that's for sure. But you can't say that he didn't reach the top of his profession, because he did. Bill Gates, no one likes wrestling that I know. Needed you all tonight. Yeah, there's a lot of people who, they don't have a lot of wrestling friends. So, we kind of have our own little community, and obviously there's a lot of other people here tonight as well, not just our usual people, but sometimes you just need other wrestling fans to talk to, because you don't know what to do with yourself. You can post a tweet, but then it just sits there, right? You need to have that interaction and just talk to other people. I think that's a good thing. Power Blind, it's good to see you. Saints 2025. I just opened Twitter and it was the first thing that I saw. I cannot really process this right now. Stellar Steven. Met you in Orlando in 2017 wearing my Wyatt shirt. I do remember that meetup. I don't remember the shirt, but I do remember the Orlando meetup. That was the WrestleMania that Bray went into as the champion. HBKC83, not many go through life and become an inspiration, but when someone does, it truly means that person lived life the right way. Rest in peace, Bray. It's well said. Leon, Bray's death is of course more important, still shocking. Expecting people at Wembley to chant for him a bit. I'm sure he'll be getting a lot of love this weekend. This week and next week, I'm sure you're going to be hearing a lot of love and support for Bray Wyatt. You're going to see, what you're going to see? At a lot of these shows, you're going to see a lot of fireflies all over the crowd. And Buzzsaw says, rest in peace, Bray Wyatt. He truly has the whole world and our hearts in his hands. Some very, very well said messages. And we have Blissfan in the chat as well. And Blissfan may be the biggest Bray Wyatt fan that I know, and probably a lot of us here in this chat know. He is as hardcore of a Bray Wyatt and Alexa Bliss fan as I have ever known. And he's not one of these fair weather fans, jumping on the bandwagon when somebody gets hotter or anything like that. So I'm thinking about you, Bliss fan, because I know this is really shitty for you as well. Nobody was a bigger fan of Bray's work than Bliss fan was. Always having debates with people in the chat about why Bray should be the one to beat Roman Reigns and what Bray should be doing and who he should be working with next. Just the quintessential fan. So I'm thinking about you, brother. Now, for the people who are just coming in, one last time here, because I know there are still some people who are not fully aware of what's going on here, although you can probably figure it out from the thumbnail here in the stream. But Triple H posted a tweet earlier this evening. He was the one who broke the news, letting everybody know that he got a call from Mike Rotunda, who informed him of the news that Bray Wyatt unexpectedly passed away earlier today. And it was Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful on his Twitter account who added a little bit more to that later on. He said he was given permission to reveal that earlier this year, Windham Rotunda, Bray Wyatt, got COVID, and that exacerbated a heart issue. There was a lot of positive progress towards a return and his recovery, and unfortunately today he suffered a heart attack and he passed away. And he was only 36 years old. He leaves behind a wife and I believe 4 children, 2 from his previous marriage and 2 from his marriage to JoJo Offerman. He leaves behind a lot of devastated colleagues and friends in the wrestling business and fans as well. And it is just shocking all around. And I'm sure that we will get more details and other information in the days and weeks ahead. But right now, that is what we know. Chase Blank says he was heartbroken when he heard the news. Going to SmackDown tomorrow, and am honored to pay my respects. Rest in paradise, Bray. Eric Fisher says, just watch the Firefly Funhouse match. My favorite version of him will always be cult leader Bray Wyatt. Thank you, Windham, for the memories. And Bill Gates says, thank you. Very torn up. I love you guys. Right back at you, brother. Now, I mentioned that, before I bow out, that I would share a very quick Bray Wyatt story. It's probably my favorite Bray Wyatt story that I've ever heard. And it comes from, and I told the story once before on the podcast, but it was a long time ago, and there's probably a lot of people who have never heard it before. But JTG was part of WWE for many years. And he wrote a couple of books, but he wrote a book called Why Did I Write This Book 2? How to Play the Games. It was the sequel to the first book that he wrote. And he told a Bray Wyatt story in the book, and I just quickly jotted down the notes that I had from the first time I gathered it from the story. But basically the story is this. One night they're in the car together. They're riding buddies, and they're going to Monday Night Raw, and I don't remember where. It's not really relevant. But they're in the car, and they're driving to Monday Night Raw, and Bray is driving. And there's another car that comes up from behind them, and they're driving very erratically. And they nearly sideswipe the car that had Bray and JTG in it. And there's no one in the lane next to them, so they were able to merge over because otherwise that would not have been very good. So in the other car on the road, there's another car that has Big E and Alex Riley in it, and they're riding together. That same car swipes them off the road. So now shit's about to get real. And Bray speeds after this car that's causing all of this chaos on the road. And the people in the other car are driving like maniacs. And, they have no regard clearly for anybody else on the road. It's a very dangerous situation. I don't know how fast they were going, but obviously they were going a lot faster than they should have been. And sure enough, the car ends up rolling. And the car flips over about half a dozen times. And now the car is upside down on its roof. It's like something you see out of a movie, right? And you don't know whether the people inside are okay or not, but the car is smoking, which is never a good sign. So they hear cries, they hear voices crying from the car, and they see that it's a bunch of teenagers inside the car. Now, JTG does not want to go anywhere near this car because he's probably seen a lot of movies in his day. In TV shows. And if you see a car that was just in an accident, and especially if it's smoking, he's probably thinking this thing is going to explode. So he doesn't want to go anywhere near the car in case it blows up. But Bray has no problem going over to the car. And he reaches into the car and he pulls a girl out through the back window. And he tried to pull the driver out, but her seatbelt was fastened, and so she was stuck because of the seatbelt. It was jammed. So he called over to JTG and asked him to come over and help. And JTG did not want to go over and help because, again, he's concerned that this car might blow up. But he relents and he goes over and he helps, and they pull the girl out of the car. They pulled the girls out of the car to safety. They got no thank you from the girls for saving their lives. The only thing they were concerned about was, please don't tell our parents. Please don't tell our parents. Meanwhile, their car is upside down in the middle of the road, and they could have killed somebody, the way that they were driving. And JTG said that outside of the conversation that he and Bray had when they got back in their car to continue on to the arena, outside of whatever they talked about the rest of the way, Bray never brought the story up again. He didn't go on social media to advertise it. He didn't do what he did for publicity. He just did it because he felt it was the right thing to do, even though they were driving like assholes and putting other people's lives at risk. He saw people in need. He saw a bunch of teenagers in need and disregarded his own safety to try to go over and help them and save their lives, even if they were ungrateful. He did the right thing. That just shows you the kind of human being that he is, because a lot of people would do that. A lot of people would not. Evidently, JTG is one of those people. But that's the kind of person that Bray Wyatt was. And I always loved that story the first time I heard that, because it was the first time that I heard it, because Bray never went around telling that story, because that's not why he did it. And I just thought that was a good story to share that kind of gives you a sense of the kind of person that he was. Melik Gaming just saw the news and is pretty devastated by it. I'm sure that you are not the only one. I want to thank you for just hanging out with me here for a little bit. I hope it was helpful to some of you. I know a lot of people are very upset. I think we're all upset about this news. There's nothing good or happy about it. But I hope it was helpful just to, hang out for a little bit and just share stories and some memories and favorite matches and moments and things of that nature. And there'll be a time and a place to talk more about Bray Wyatt. But that is the update. That is all the information I have at the moment. And those are my thoughts and my feelings and memories. And it's going to be a huge loss for a lot of people in that company. So just keep that in mind, when you make comments online and say things that, there are a lot of people right now who are going through a really shitty, very difficult time. And whether it's friends, family, fans, whoever it may be, just, keep those people in your thoughts. And most importantly, I always say it in these situations, but, life can be cruel, but life can also be very precious, and it is not guaranteed. So no matter, you may be the picture of health, you may be a young person, you may be an older person, it really doesn't matter. It could all be gone in a flash. So don't take anything for granted. Always keep that in mind. And with that being said, certainly Bray Wyatt is somebody who we will never forget. 36 years old. Rest in peace to Bray Wyatt. You will be missed.